Hey guys, I'm back with another video, and today we will be teaching you how to play Logbait and some tips and tricks in this video for beginners and some people who might have been playing it for some time. Today we will go over what the deck is, cards that are in it and cards that can come in and out of it as replacements if you don't already have them, how the strategy works, what your opening hand is going to be like, and some handy tips and tricks. This video is generally meant for beginners, but it could slightly help you if you've been playing it for a while. And yeah, I played with this deck with a variation using Valkyrie and Tesla instead of Knight and Inferno Tower, and I won 9 out of 10 games in Arena 15, which is pretty good. So firstly, here's the original deck, which has Goblin Barrels the win condition, Log and Rocket as spells, Knight, Ice Spirit, Inferno Tower on defense, and Princess and Goblin Gang, which can be used for defense as well, or to bait out your opponent's spells, which is at the core of the deck. This deck has a cheap 3.3 elixir average, making it a lot cheaper than most decks. Next, I'll show you some cards that we can use instead of the ones in the deck. Firstly, before we get started on this, the Goblin Barrel should stay in the deck at all costs because it is the win condition and the main component, but most of the rest of the cards can be replaced. The Ice Spirit can be replaced by any other elixir card, just to surprise them, but I would only suggest replacing it with Electro Spirit because it is good to have a card in your deck that can stun for things like Zappies or Sparky or anything you really want to stun. Next we have the Log, which can be replaced with arrows or zap, but the Log is just generally the best card to use. I like it the most, but if you have your zap maxed or your arrows maxed, then yeah, sure, you can use it. Next, the Princess is a vital part of the deck, and I wouldn't suggest replacing it, but if you don't have it yet, you could use Archers, Firecracker, Dart Goblin, and these all work, but if you have Princess, do use it, it's just a lot better. Next, we have the Knight, and it has a lot of replacements like Valkyrie, Rascals, Dark Prince, Prince, Bandit, Mini P.E.K.K.A, but Valkyrie is the most popular replacement. If you're a beginner, I do suggest using Valkyrie. It's a lot easier to use because it splashes any ground troops, but if you're more advanced, I'd suggest using Knight because it's just a lot easier to use. And like Princess, the Goblin Gang is also a very vital part of the deck, being able to be used to bait out your opponent's spells, but it can also be replaced with Skami, which is quite likely the same, except you don't get the Spear Goblins. Now, the Inferno Tower is the main defensive card in the deck, but in the recent meta, Tesla is being used a lot more because it has quite good DPS and it hides underground, making it immune to lightning spells while it's not active. But this is a lot harder to use often because it has a smaller range, and meaning that it's harder for troops to get it. Like Hog Rider and Ram Rider and Balloon, you have to be quite good to pull these cards towards your Tesla if you want to use it. Lastly, we have Rocket, which can be replaced with Lightning and Fireball, but sometimes even Skeleton Barrel, which just acts as another Goblin Barrel. It can also help bait out the spells again, and yeah. So, Logbait works through using cards like Princess and Goblin Gang, which try to make your opponent play their spells like Log, so that you can then Goblin Barrel freely and it will do a lot more damage because they can't spell it. Once you seem to get the hang of it, Logbait is seen as quite easy to play and grow really strong, and it has been boosted in the last couple of years with the addition of Tiebreaker. Essentially, Tiebreaker just lets you win even if you haven't taken their crown, if you've just done more damage onto their tower. This helps Logbait because even though we have the rocket cycle, often games can go into overtime because it's just one win conditions, it's quite small and generally doesn't do that much damage. And yeah. Now, for your opening hand, if you have the Goblin Barrel in your opening hand, you want to play it as soon as you hit 10 elixir, because even if your opponent zaps and logs it, in the difference of time, they will have leaked 1 elixir, meaning that you'll still be equal, and you've just gotten a free thing in. Yeah, which is pretty good, but if you have something else, like maybe Princess and Goblin Gang and Ice Spirit, you can just try and cycle them, and maybe place down a building if your opponent's just leaking. Yeah. If you're still watching here, here's the bit you've been waiting for. Tips and tricks on how to use logbait. Also, just quickly, please go and subscribe if you liked this video and found it easy to learn from and found it helpful, yeah. Tip number 1 is to try and protect your princess, and the longer it lives, the more damage it will do. This is also important for the princess because it can attack from behind the bridge, meaning that the towers won't kill it and your opponent is always going to have to be spending more elixir. This can just be simple to do by just placing like a knight in front of it or an ice spirit just to counter it so it gets that extra damage and puts pressure back on your opponent. Number 2, if your opponent is using Tornado, then try and place your Goblin Barrel on the top corner of their tower and the far side from the King Tower to prevent activation. This can move the goblins a little bit, but not far enough so that they can activate it, and they'll still get a few neat hits, which is pretty good. Number 3 is just to try and get rocket value from things like witches, wizards, and sparkies when your opponent plays them in the back, because this can stop a massive push and it's really helpful. Number 4 is to try not to place buildings before you need them, because the longer they live, the less health they have, meaning that sometimes they can be a waste of elixir, and by the time your opponent's golem gets to your bridge, your building's already dead. Number 5 is make sure to counter some tanks like Mini P.E.K.K.A, Prince, Bandit, Knight, or Rascals with Goblin Gang and Ice Spirit combo, which can work quite effectively sometimes, but sometimes it won't be appropriate. Anyway, thank you so much for watching all the way through this video. If you found it helpful or interesting, please subscribe to my channel for more tips and tricks on decks like this and other ones I'll be making in the future.